Okay, so this video is going to be covering Chapter 8 of Advancing Vocabulary Skills. I don't have my book with me today, but I encourage you to go ahead and follow along in your book. Let's take a first look here at these words and guess parts of speech. Our first one here is clandestine, contingency, egocentric, exonerate, there's a clue there, 8. Incongruous, OUS is a clue. Indigenous, same thing, OUS is a clue. Liability, that ITY is a clue. Prolific. Reinstate, that 8 again is a clue. Superphallus, and OUS is a clue for us there. Pardon me. So our first word here is clandestine. And this one is an adjective. So the stress in this one is on the second syllable, so clandestine instead of clandestine. In a clandestine meeting in an alley, Steve sold his employer's valuable anti-aging formula to a competitor. The famous Underground Railroad was not an actual railroad. It was a clandestine network that took escaped slaves to safety in the years before the Civil War. So clandestine means is secret. Another way of thinking about this is something that is kept secret or done secretly, and oftentimes it is secret because it's illegal. So when we describe something as clandestine, you wouldn't necessarily say, like keeping your friend's secret that she likes another guy is not necessarily clandestine, because clandestine has a tendency of it's secret because if people knew about it, it would be, the person would get in trouble because it was illegal. So if we look at the first example, this is a clandestine meeting because what the guy is doing is he's selling his employer's, formula, which is against the law, which is illegal. In the second one, it was illegal at the time for slaves from the South to run away to the North. So that's why we're saying that it is clandestine. Contingency. So this is a noun. Faye thought her company might transfer her to another city. With that contingency in mind, she decided to rent a house rather than buy one. We believe in providing for every contingency. We have a list of emergency phone numbers, a first aid kit, and a box of candles in case of power failure. What contingency means is a possibility. But again, it by itself, this possibility is not a perfect synonym. So what a contingency really means is that it's talking about a possibility in the future. So what we're talking about is a future event or circumstance that's possible but can't be predicted with certainty. So in the first one, what the contingency, the possible event that Faye has in mind is that the possibility is that her company will transfer her after she moves. So she'll move, say she moves to Boston, but it's possible, there's the contingency that her company will move her again to New York. So again, she doesn't know, but it's possible. In the second example, when your power goes out, you may need a first aid kit to take care of something. You probably do need you may need a box of candles. You might not if it's during the day. But basically, contingency means a possibility of something happening in the future. Oftentimes, it is used in the sense of something bad. Something bad that might happen that you need to be prepared for. So you could also talk about it as a contingency could be an emergency, meaning something possibly that happens in the future that is not foreseeable, but you want to be prepared for it. Our next word here is egocentric, and this one is an adjective. Dennis is completely egocentric. Whatever event takes place, she thinks only of how it will affect her personally. We've talked enough about me, said the egocentric author to a friend. Now let's talk about you. What do you think of my new book? So egocentric, selfish. If we take a look at this word and we break it up into parts, we'll see that there's two clear parts here. There's ego and there's centric. So ego is the, I haven't studied philosophy, but I'm sure that some of you guys have. Not philosophy, psychology. I'm sure some of you have studied a lot more than I have. But there's this idea of the ego, the id and the ego, right? And the ego, I believe, is the sense of self. Our ego is the part of us that gets embarrassed or feels pride. Our ego is that part of ourself that thinks that we're important. So egocentric, that means is that someone just focuses on themselves, how something makes them feel, embarrassed or proud or something like this, or how something affects them. It can also be used, another definition is thinking only of yourself without regard to the feelings or desires of others, or self-centered. So someone who's egocentric, this is never a positive thing, because it's important to think about how things affect us, but that shouldn't keep us from thinking about how these same things will affect other people. So in the first example, she's so egocentric. So say there's an earthquake in Hawaii. She doesn't think about the people there who died or affected. The only thing that she thinks about is how it's going to affect her travel plans to go to Hawaii, or is that going to make the price of pineapples more expensive for her? So you can see that being egocentric is not a positive thing. Our next word here is exonerate, and this one is a verb. Saul was suspected of shoplifting, but he was exonerated when the hidden camera's photos clearly showed another man taking handfuls of DVD from a rack and stuffing them into his backpack. Politicians accused of illegal activities always seem to say the same thing, that they'll be exonerated when all the facts are known. Exonerate means is to be found not guilty. But really to exonerate means to be cleared. Another way to think about it is to be cleared from guilt, or proven to be innocent. Normally, when we talk about the word exonerate, it's not that one person. It's not like I did something, that someone accused me of doing something wrong and another person says, no, you didn't do that. Exonerate is often associated with being found not guilty through a process of law. Here in this one definition, it says, especially after due consideration of the case. So being exonerated means that someone or somebody looks at all of the facts of the situation, and through a careful consideration of all of the facts, they found the person to be not guilty. So in the first example, he was exonerated not just because someone said you didn't steal the DVDs, but it's because they looked at the camera and they carefully looked at it and studied it and found that it wasn't him taking the DVDs. In the second example, the politicians are saying they will be exonerated when all the facts are known. So their argument is like, when everybody knows, when everybody has looked at everything, all of the information, it'll be clear that I haven't done anything wrong. So incongruous is an adjective with this OUS ending. The cuckoo lays eggs in other birds' nest. This practice can result in the incongruous sight of one large cuckoo chick among several tiny baby robins. It really wasn't incongruous for a former general to join the peace movement. He'd seen the horrors of war. What incongruous means is contradictory. Now, it's been a long time since I took geometry, but I believe that there's a word that talks about incongruent lines. And maybe I'm wrong. It's been a long time, but incongruent, I believe it means that they're not parallel, meaning that they'll cross, meaning that they're not going the same direction, that they're going different directions. So when we use the word incongruous, what we're really saying is that these are things that are not in harmony. This is another definition: not in harmony or keeping with the surrounding or other aspects of something. So basically, to describe something as incongruous, you're saying that it, not just that it's contradictory, but that it doesn't seem to belong, that it doesn't seem to fit into the situation. So in the first example, it's saying the incongruous thing is that you have this big bird with all of these small birds, right? One of these things doesn't belong. In the second one, we're saying, the peace movement, it seems incongruous to have a general there because generals are the ones who fight wars. But whatever it's saying, it's not incongruous. But to say something is incongruous means that that something doesn't fit in. Another way to think about it is out of place. If something is incongruous, it's out of place or it's inappropriate for the situation. Our next word here is indigenous, and this one is an adjective. Kangaroos are indigenous only in Australia. They've never been found living anywhere else in the world. Corn was not indigenous to Europe, so Europeans had never seen or heard of it until their explorers first reached the New World and found it growing there. Indigenous means is native. And by native, what we mean is that it's originally from an area or naturally occurs in a particular place without it being brought there from outside. So in the first example, it's like kangaroos. You can find kangaroos in the zoo, I'm sure, all over the world. But the only place that you'll find them in nature without people having brought them there is in Australia. Corn was an example that was an indigenous plant in the Americas. So while I'm sure they grow corn now in Europe and they grow them in other parts of the world, it's not indigenous to there because that's not where it's originally from. So indigenous is often used in science books when they're talking about plants or animals. Indigenous species are animals that naturally occur in one environment or another. And oftentimes there's a problem when basically a foreign animal or plant comes in and competes with the indigenous plants because it's not supposed to be there. Another word we can use for this is besides native is original. The original. Those of you guys who are Spanish speakers, especially from Latin America and South America, I think that you use a similar word like this for the native people, the indigenous people. We have that term here in the United States as well. And the indigenous people would be the Native Americans or the American Indians, sometimes they're called. And similarly in Latin and South America, there's indigenous people who are sometimes referred to as Indians as well. Our next word here is liability, and this one's a noun. Now this ity, it not all the time, but a lot of the times that one signals a noun. My shyness with strangers would be a liability in any job that involved meeting the public, such as sales. When Juanita returned to school at age 40, she was afraid her age would be a liability. Instead, she found it gave her an advantage over younger students. So a liability is a handicap. By handicap, we mean not necessarily a physical handicap, but some sort of thing that makes it difficult for you to do something. So a liability is often associated with a particular situation. So like in the first example, it's saying shyness is a liability in sales, but shyness is not a liability if you're, say, a librarian or if you're an accountant. If you're shy but you don't work with people, it's not a liability. But if you are shy and you have to work with people, that's going to hurt you, make it more difficult for you to do your job. Another way of thinking about it is, pardon me, is something that might cause embarrassment or to put you at a disadvantage. You could think of it, a liability, as a burden or an inconvenience, meaning that it's something that doesn't necessarily stop you from doing whatever it needs to do, but it does make it more difficult or makes it more inconvenient. Our next word here is prolific, and this one is an adjective. Rabbits deserve their reputation for being prolific. A female rabbit can produce 3 families each year. Haydn was a prolific composer. He wrote, among many other musical works, 104 symphonies. So what prolific means? Creating abundantly. So we can think of this in 2 different ways. When we use the word prolific to describe a plant or an animal or a person, what we mean is that it produces a lot of fruit or produces a lot of leaves, or in the terms of animals, it means it produces a lot of offspring, a lot of children. So we talk about rabbits being prolific because they can have a lot of children. In the second example, that we can talk about it in terms of people being prolific, it means that they create a great amount of something. So in the second example, Haydn is a famous classical music composer, writer of classical music. So he was prolific, meaning that he created a lot of songs, a lot of symphonies and other musical works. If an author is prolific, it means that he or she has created a lot of books or articles or magazines or poems or whatever that person writes. So there's 2 ways to think of this. We can say prolific in terms of the first meaning. We could say it means like something is very fertile, meaning that it creates a lot of things. When we talk about prolific in terms of creating like music, like this example of Haydn, we could also talk about prolific as meaning productive, as in producing many things. Our next word is reinstate, and this one ends in the 8 sound, making it a verb. Michiko left work for a year to stay home with her new baby. When she returned, she was relieved and happy to be reinstated in her former job. The college had canceled the course in folklore, but the demand was so great that the class had to be reinstated. So reinstate means to put back. So if we actually look at this word part, we can see that we can learn something about it. The prefix re means again, right? So reinstate means to instate again. So to instate means to create something or put something in a certain situation. So reinstate means to put something back in the situation that it was before, or the level it was before. Another definition of it means to restore someone or something to their former position or condition. So in the first example, Michiko was restored to her former position, her former job. She was put back in the same place. In the second one, the class was put back into its same position before. Some other words you can think of that are similar to it means to return to power, return someone to power, to reinstate, or to bring back something that was there before. All right, so here's our last word, which is superfluous. And remember, in this one, the stress is on the second one, superfluous, not not superfluous. Anyway, this one ends in OUS, make it in an adjective. In the phrase rich millionaire, the word rich is superfluous. All millionaires are rich. Lately, business at the store has been so slow that the 3 clerks have almost nothing to do. 2 of them seem superfluous. So what superfluous means is unnecessary. But really, it means unnecessary. Here in this definition, it means unnecessary, especially through being more than enough. So if something is superfluous, it's unnecessary, not because it doesn't work or not because it's inappropriate for the job. It's superfluous because we already have enough of something. So in the word rich millionaire, the adjective rich is superfluous because the word millionaire, there's no other kind of millionaire. They're all rich, right? To be a millionaire is rich. So we already have the meaning of rich. So to add the meaning rich, you're not adding anything new. You're just adding something extra when you have enough already. In the second example, the 3 clerks, 2 of them are superfluous, not because they don't know how to do the job or they're bad at their job. It's just that one person can do the job. You have more than enough people. Another way to think of this is something that's superfluous is not essential or redundant or extra, extra, but in the way of more of the same. All right, so we've reached the end, so go ahead and do whatever exercises you have to do online or on paper, and then come to class with any questions that you have. Take care. Bye.